Hello, and welcome to the oral defense for PS 515, Comparative Foreign Policy, Bellevue University, ISIS program. Professor is Dr. Matthew Croston. I'm Sean Owens. Today is August 11, 2013. And the title of my paper is Nigeria, a Foreign Policy Analysis. So when we look at an overview of Nigeria's current foreign policy, we see that the primary focus is to contribute to the principles of African unity and to be the cornerstone of African diplomacy. Nigeria has had some successes with its foreign policy in recent years. They've been recognized as being in the forefront of addressing international terrorism, human rights issues, and democratization, leading democratization in the region. However, there are critiques of Nigeria's foreign policy. One, that there's too narrow of a regional focus rather than looking at global. There's a lack of transparency in addressing the uprising in the northern regions, that they're not doing enough to protect the citizens in the areas affected by that uprising, and that there is growing governmental distrust, primarily due to electoral corruption claims. Now, there are challenges to Nigeria's foreign policy: pockets of high poverty, increasing unemployment, areas of growing governmental distrust, all of which have led to an Islamist uprising in the northern regions, which we've identified as the primary threat to Nigeria's foreign policy and will be the basis of this paper. So as we look at the paper, we will address the nature of the Islamist uprising. We will look at prescriptions for stopping and preventing future revolt. These prescriptions will come from academic positions and research, analyst commentary, looking at what has and what has not worked globally in similar situations. We'll take components of current policy which has shown success, and we'll blend those together to create unique, encompassing prescriptions. Now, hopefully we'll also look at how we can leverage those prescriptions to potentially expand Nigeria's foreign policy reach beyond just African significance to global significance as well. So when we look at the things that impact Nigeria's foreign policy, we look at how Nigeria is the largest country in Africa. It does have 55% of West Africa's gross domestic product. It does have significant advantages over other countries in the area. There's large quantities of natural resources and vast oil reserves. Nigeria is poised to be the fourth most populated country in the world by 2050. However, economic gain and job creation hasn't matched that population growth. Poverty has grown at a rate of 60%. Nearly 2/3 of the residents of Nigeria live in slums. There's high unemployment, particularly among the youth and those in the northern states, and there's an ideological and geographical split between Muslims and Christians. You have the Muslims in the northern regions, the Christians in the south, and the current leadership of Nigeria is predominantly Christian, which is a change from recent years where there was more of Muslim influence and more of a split. So when we look at the Islamist uprising, again, we're going to identify that as the largest threat to national security and for achieving Nigeria's foreign policy goals. It's grown increasingly violent in recent years. Known terrorists are now being recognized as joining the cause. Some analysts are claiming to see links to Al-Qaeda. Schools and businesses are closed in the northern regions. Parts of the cities and towns look like war zones. Entire communities are being lost to the uprising. And Nigeria so far has been very guarded with both press, foreign analysis, human rights watch groups, declaring cell phone blackouts and social media blackouts, and not allowing the rest of the world to see what's going on. And part of that has led to criticism over the violent responses of the force-based threats that Nigeria has responded with so far. There are claims that there's been numerous civilian killings and that the military of Nigeria is indiscriminately killing both the insurgents and civilians. So when we look at the first prescription that we're recommending for Nigeria to address this uprising, we look at regional cooperation. Now, regional cooperation means partnership aimed at stopping the proliferation of violent radicals moving across borders, targeting the supply and the financial infrastructure of the insurgency. Now, this prescription is born from looking at other places around the world where there has been success at addressing similar situations. For example, in Latin America, there has been success of cooperation and partnership between local police forces and governments in not allowing insurgents and known radicals from moving across borders and from targeting the financial infrastructure in support of those groups. And to date, Latin America has prevented or not seen a large Islamic uprising. Now, we recommend that Nigeria invest its resources in partnering with its neighbors to the north, such as Niger, Cameroon, and Chad, countries where we know that there are known radicals and known criminals moving into Nigeria, where we know supplies move across borders into Nigeria, but those countries may not be on their own able or capable of stopping that flow of criminals. We believe that Nigeria would be well vested in investing their time and their resources and their personnel into helping those countries and preventing the flow of those criminals and those supplies and resources. We also think that Nigeria could leverage the African Union for regional support. Nigeria has played a large role in both the creation of the African Union and for the African Union progressing on its goals. Nigeria should leverage some of that cooperation or some of that gains for regional partnership and goals aimed at limiting known radicals and terrorist groups from moving from country to country and into northern Nigeria. We also recommend that Nigeria leverage existing relationships where they've had success before. Places like Saudi Arabia, where Nigeria does have relationships and does have diplomacy. They could use that to prevent the uprising from growing and gaining support from other areas in the Middle East and Northern Africa, but also they could leverage the support of strong, vocal Muslim leaders from Saudi Arabia, which ties into prescription number 2, which is leveraging prominent leadership from the Muslim community. Now, the existing Muslim leaders in northern Nigeria did not necessarily start or create the uprising, but it is believed that their ambivalence didn't prevent it from occurring and may have even legitimized the activities of those radicals. The academic and scholarly prescription related to this recommendation is that by leveraging vocal Muslim leaders to also have a voice that is similar to that of the governments calling for peace, it could help with those communities that are stretched between the insurgency and the government. So Nigeria could partner with the prominent leaders from both inside Nigeria and from surrounding countries, making concessions and compromises to not alienate the Muslim population, but to gain support of the Muslim population to achieving their goals. They could utilize existing relationships with those Muslim countries that they already have and bring equal voice to the calls for peace. And this leads us to prescription number 3, which is actually addressing the root cause of the insurgency. There are many analysts who believe that the rebellion is not based upon religious tenets, but rather on the social economic conditions of the regions that are impacted. Distrust in the elections, distrust in the government have all led to communities and pockets of communities feeling as though they don't have a voice or a say in the future of their country or in their own individual futures. Nigeria could or should focus on job creation in those parts of the countries to lead to hope and optimism and to the buy-in of those communities. And they need to increase the social welfare programs, both in quantity and in effectiveness, to help offset those leading the insurgency, which do a really good job of trying to protect or influence their local communities. And Nigeria must address the disparate poverty demographics. With those large mineral reserves and with those oil resources, Nigeria has the ability to increase economic gain for all of its citizens, or at least opportunity for economic gain for its citizens, not just for pockets and not just for particular places along within the country, but for the entire country. These prescriptions aside, there are legitimate reasons for force-based reaction from Nigeria's government. However, we believe that this needs to be an appropriate use of force along with increased international visibility into the actions. More precise and careful use of force when necessary would help minimize civilian casualties. Civilian casualties do nothing to forward Nigeria's goals. They just increase the animosity of those communities impacted and bring in the international security of those who claim that they're not doing enough to protect its citizens and the human rights watch groups. The increased transparency of allowing the media and the analysts to come in, as opposed to worrying about the risk of potential loss of investment, could be offset by support and empathy from the international community when they can see what actually Nigeria is trying to deal with and the heinous nature of the crimes of those committing the uprising. And to date, Nigeria has been very guarded in acknowledging or even exposing Al-Qaeda connections or connections to other international groups, international terrorist groups. By increasing the cooperation, the visibility, and making it known that there is a potential for this type of cooperation occurring with the local insurgents, Nigeria might actually find itself gaining international support. The West and the United States and specifically have been known to show support for governments and groups that are combating Al-Qaeda and known terrorist agencies. So in conclusion, Nigeria has made progress on its foreign policy goals. They have moved into a position of regional leadership. They do have the potential to improve their international reputation. However, increased segmented poverty, growing unemployment, and distrust in the government all threaten the progress of their goals and lead to the uprising or the unrest in the northern regions. that Islamist uprising threatens national security and puts the foreign policy goals of Nigeria at risk. So our prescriptions, again, were the increase of regional cooperation, partnering with Muslim leadership to prevent unified messaging, and addressing the actual root cause of the uprising to prevent and to stop the existing uprising. Now, we believe that this may not only stop the current crisis, it could prevent future uprisings and even drive the policies and the goals of Nigeria beyond its regional limitations to positions of global significance. And this concludes the oral defense. Thank you.